Hi everyone, I'm João Costa, also known as Polygon Masterworks, and I'm here with,
with Rick Graham with Revelations.
and this is episode 6 of the Mechs and Miniatures podcast. For this episode, we're gonna do a community question and answer from people in our communities that has some things that they want us to talk about. First up, and appropriately for the question, Bondsman actually asks us how Black Star is shaping up and what's the near future for Revelations. So, what's the near future for Revelations, Rick?
so, uh, so it's quite a bit actually. We have a number of I'm gonna go ahead and label it as like secret projects. But we're working on the fourth major faction, the Faust Union. We have a second vehicle in development. We have a second Warmac in development. I have to test some supports, so like printing tests
Right.
for the first vehicle and mech that I have, and we are still looking for an infantry modeler. Um, so all of that is really good progress. I'm working on, as I mentioned in the last episode, outlining the Blood Wolves trilogy. Um, and then we're kind of just we've got a number of people reaching out that want to do play testing, that want to help do some other capacities. So there's a lot of stuff that's shifting in a good way, that's helping to move the brand and the game forward. And I'm excited about it because it's a lot of outside of me movement. It's when you do this stuff for so long, and then when other people come alongside or get excited as fans, that it's very rejuvenating.
Yeah, you feel more excitement and energy around you, and it's not just you having to drag everything along, right?
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
um and then it's the community is doing well. The our Discord server continues to it's slow but steady growth. um there's game sales, and it's a lot of stuff that's helping to um, move things forward. I'm now in a I'm not going to say I'm in a wealthy position by any stretch. We don't have those sort of sales, but we are. I'm trying to look ahead of um, what there's a few more opportunities that are opening up that I didn't have before, that we're trying to investigate for a couple of different deals that I'm not ready to announce yet to everybody, but we've got a couple of uh, possible partnerships that we're working on,
That's cool.
that will help in different capacities, different. But um, pretty soon we'll be able to start announcing some of this, and I'm hoping some additional models that will be here soon. We have something actually that we're doing, is one of our Warmax, the Ares, is being remodeled to fit more with the Union of Stars aesthetic, and it is a gorgeous model. It's going to be really cool to see on the table, and we're hoping to have that within a month. Um, and that one, you know, it's something where when you're dealing with products you've already had released, how do you address that? How do you get that into customer hands? So what we've decided to do is everyone who already owns the Aries, the current Aries, they'll be able to download the update. And then we've done some other things where, like that old model, we're trying to see what we can do with it. Maybe I'll make it mercenary unit, make it something else. But um, you're always trying to
Pirates.
grow. Yeah, pirates and stuff. But you're always trying to grow, and it's an awkward place because you kind of like, this is what it looks like, and then you're like later, eh, it looks better if it looks like this. We have to pretend this is what it always was.
Well, I think people are understanding of that stuff, unless you're changing the model every 6 months, of course. But
Mm,
even
yeah, I wouldn't want to do
even
that.
even bigger companies like GW, like every like 5 or 6 years, some models get updated. It's fine, and it's sometimes it just needs to happen. I understand people already had the model, or now there's a fancier version of it. I mean, it's sometimes it needs to happen. As long as it doesn't happen all the time, I think it's okay. Especially with 3D printing. I mean, it's not
Oh
like
yeah,
you bought an expensive Warhammer 40k kit and now it's outdated. I mean, just print another one.
yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, so that's a lot of the stuff going on. I don't know. I could make a whole episode, so I'll just leave it at
Yeah,
that.
of course, of course. And have you checked? I'm betting you have checked ArtStation and all that for that infantry modeler. There's a
No,
lot
I
of
haven't yet.
no,
No, I haven't. That's not normally how I find modelers. So
right.
I haven't even looked there.
Well, obviously on ArtStation you will find all sorts of ranges of skill, right? But I mentioned ArtStation specifically because it does have miniatures and board games categories, and you can find a lot of um, miniature modelers, sculptors, digital sculptors over there. So you should definitely check it out. Then it's just a matter of finding one that is within your price range.
Okay. Well, no, it's good to know.
I should show you a few of them that I have like bookmarked when we get done recording this.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, and in terms of Black Star, things have been also moving along. A lot of stuff has been happening behind the scenes. I'm working on a deal that I'm not ready to reveal yet, but should be revealed hopefully in the next 2 weeks. Um, I've been basically trying to get scaling right. Yesterday, I posted a new devlog talking about those scale changes and also revamping the data slate, which for you Battletech players would be like the record sheet. The data slate for Blackstar has been changed and now includes customization, and I updated some of the elements regarding the game mechanics. But there's a lots of stuff over on Blackstar that have been happening behind the scenes that aren't ready yet for me to show. Hopefully, the next devlog, I'm now doing a devlog per week in order to show more progress faster and to get more people involved in the progress of making the game. I have a lot of art that has been done and has been building up that I still have to show, and Mech designs that are being finalized as we speak. So the next devlogs will be very interesting with a lot of visual stuff, and particularly I will start going to the actual game mechanics ahead of the alpha rules release, which I'm guessing will now happen sometime in May. So that's how Black Star is shaping up at the moment. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
So on to the next question from Carl Steiger. He asks us to if we are particularly interested in stuff that is going on in the mecha scene right now and community projects or other games that we are interested in. Um, what have you been looking at, Rick? Have you been
Um,
playing anything? Taking an interest in any tabletop game or video game?
I have been like I've mentioned previously, Star Wars Legion is
Right,
my outside entertainment game. Um, outside of that, I've I kind of keep like a very loose, very cursory awareness of certain other brands um, and games like Cav. Um, I have, one of the bigger things that has come out that's made some waves temporary, for right now is Operation Lancaster.
right.
I have not had an opportunity to digest any of it because I did click through and I was like, wow, to me, it feels incredibly well done. Especially when you understand that it's fan made, and then you're like, goodness,
Yeah,
because of the sheer size of it and the original art and everything else that was poured into that um, is clearly shown.
Yeah,
Um,
and Lancaster is basically combining a novel and a technical readout. So it's 500 pages or something like that.
yeah, yeah. So it was a huge undertaking, clearly. Um, Outside of that, I've I kind of have tunnel vision at the moment, and I've been a lot of my free time has been, what do I do with Revelations?
Yeah,
How do I reach more people? And I've um
I know the feeling.
kind of, yeah, I'm in that mode where I'm like, I'm aware of things around me, but like this is all I can almost see is just this.
Right, yeah. I know the feeling, although I still keep tabs with some stuff. Lancaster, as you said, is incredible. I talked to Devin Ramsey, the main guy, the main project lead for Lancaster, and it took 5 6 years to make.
Yeah,
There's like hundreds of pieces of new art, and for me, Lancaster and another project I'm gonna talk about, which is the Zukov alternate universe. These are as good as some of the commercial products that Catalyst has done. They have really good commissioned art from Matthew Plog and other artists, but mainly from Matthew Plog. They have good writing. They have a clear understanding of BattleTech and the history of BattleTech, and really some awesome concepts in there regarding like they have how some clans or some factions or some technologies could have evolved if you took BattleTech in different directions or more in-depth directions. Particularly, Zukov as well takes an interesting approach regarding giving more character and more specific visuals and more specific philosophies and equipment to the different clan factions, which I find really interesting. And as I announced a few weeks ago, I reached an agreement with Steven, the lead for Zukov, to also do some miniatures for the project, which would be cool. The original designs that he commissioned and owns, I will be doing sculpts for that and releasing them through Patreon. Um, and I have been paying attention to the latest developments around Heavy Gear, which is a game that has been around for a long time, almost as long as BattleTech. Um, uh, I remember playing those video games in the 90s that Activision did after they lost the MechWarrior license. They and Heavy Gear has now been having this push with newer content and newer units and really expanding the game. Although it's hard to find Heavy Gear product in Europe, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm finding the whole world and the units really interesting, and who knows, maybe one of them will show up in Black Star. This is not a hint of anything, because I've never talked with with them about having Heavy Gear in Black Star, but it would be an idea. I've been playing around. The trouble is that obviously the gears are smaller. They're not exactly battle armors, but they're not exactly full mechs, and they have less firepower. How could that work? I've been basically banging my head against the wall thinking about that. And yeah, and the rest of my free time is basically Black Star and Patreon stuff. So that's pretty much. I haven't really been playing any video games aside. I was playing Phantom Brigade, but even that I stopped playing like 2 or 3 weeks ago because I just haven't had the time to do it.
yeah, no, I 100% understand.
Um, so from H2CO3 comes from two questions: building lore around game mechanics versus building game mechanics around the lore. So well, in one of the previous episodes, we already talked about our different approaches to making our games, because I'm taking a very visuals first, artist first approach to Black Star, and you're a fiction writer, so you take a lore heavy approach to developing Revelations.
Right.
but this is specifically about game mechanics. So I can give an example around Black Star, right? Where I knew I wanted to make energy and the energy management that you have to make the main game mechanic, one of the main game mechanics, and obviously that would will translate to the lore. But this was a decision made first about game mechanics, and then those concepts about the core and about the energy and about how the energy defines a part of the universe actually comes from the game mechanics and then enters the lore. That's an example of the game mechanic going into the lore and helping build the lore and not the other way around. Do you have like an example on top of your head that you can give about this?
Where the game affects the lore.
Or the lore affects the game, but like a clear example where this comes from the lore and I adapted it to the game, or this comes from the game and I adapted it to the lore.
So we've had obviously as a developer, and with Revelation Skirmish, a lot of the units actually not I don't know if I want to say a lot. There's a number of the units in the game that have not been written yet, so they're not in any novel or short story. So those units, they still have all the units have to be in the game in a way where they feel relatively balanced amongst the catalog of everybody else. Um, and there has been certain weapons that have had to be modified so that they don't feel OP and they don't feel broken.
Right,
So I know that some of those have had, you can only use this weapon once per round. You can only use this weapon twice per round. Most don't have a limit, but some do. And I know that those, while they haven't been in the lore yet, those game mechanics will now affect the lore. The Starbeam cannon is a good example. That's a weapon that can only be fired twice in a round. Well, and then I had to figure out, okay, well, why is it only fired twice per round? Well, because I just came up with some hand wave thing where like the energy output is so high it can't fire rapidly. It has to cycle and charge up for the next shot. So now that's something that when I come to the lore, I'll have a reason for why the pilot's not just spam firing, rapid fire uh,
right,
death dealing starbeam cannons. Um, so it goes both ways. You have things where you're like, no, this is how my mechs need to act. This is how the tanks need to be. This is how um, this faction looks. But then you have other things that change in the game that do a turn around and affect it in the other direction.
right. And I mentioned energy and how I wanted energy management to be a central concept of the gameplay, and energy relates to everything and every component, every action that you take, and that then translates to the lore. And I can give an example of how the lore influences the game, because early on I knew what Black Star was. Black Star is an actual thing that exists in the fiction of the world, and I also knew that I wanted to have the game formatted as a Mech tournament, coming from the lore aspect of the the game and the fiction being influenced by ancient Portuguese history and medieval tournaments. So then that gets translated to game mechanics, where I know I'm developing game systems and weapon systems and the way the game works for a tournament setting and for duels or 2v2 battles, and not, for example, for an army game. So what started as concepts from the lore, the Black Star, and the medieval influence and medieval tournaments and knights battling it out, then influences what kind of game mechanics and how the actual game plays. So you can see like examples of both approaches there.
Yeah.
So He had another question for us as well, which is how deep does the lore need to go before having it overwhelming for new players?
That is a really good question.
Right, and I feel this is a question maybe you should take point on because you have a lot more lore developed for Revelations than I do.
So, one thing that had happened, I was trying to get a friend a couple years ago into BattleTech, and what I rapidly discovered is like, I had been kind of soaking in BattleTech for, I don't know, at the time, 15 years. I wouldn't consider myself a BattleTech expert, even though I've been a fan for a long time, just because there's so much, and I haven't read every novel. I haven't, I don't never owned every technical readout. No,
Right.
there's a lot of holes. Um, but trying to bring a new player in, and at the time there wasn't really an easily accessible way um, for the lore. And because then because my friend was used to like, okay, if you're getting into a new game, there's a faction that you're gonna like, and there's certain units that faction is gonna play, and just the normal cycle of how do I get into this game, and trying to kind of navigate that with him and try to help him, and kind of realizing like, oh my gosh, there's so much. There's it feels like too much, because unless you want to start, a lot of people might say, well, start in 3025. Well, we didn't want to be limited to that. And that's where we started realizing that there's a lot of problems, because how do you pick an era to play in when when someone has no attachment to a character or a faction that's in that era? Because with BattleTech, that's a crucial part. It's kind of like the difference between playing a game in World War I and World War II. Like the people involved, the factions involved, the tech involved is dramatically different. So it's like that in BattleTech as well, depending on how deep you want to get. And it was a really good learning experience for me, that I wanted to be able to keep Revelation Skirmish much more easily accessible for new people. Um, I'm sure there's some things that I could work on to make it easier, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Like, you download the rules and you just start playing.
Yeah,
Um,
it is straightforward.
we have a primer, but there is obviously a lot more lore that hasn't been introduced yet, just outside of the novels. But I do think about that. Like, okay, fast forward 5 years from now, and someone comes and they're like, "Ah, I love Revelation Skirmish, the models are amazing, the bit of the lore I know is super exciting," and that, like, they just want to become like a super fan, basically. And if at that time, let's just as a number, we have like 15 novels that are now out. If we had 15 novels, where you have to design things in such a way, or make it obvious, like, this is the best entry point, I think, in order to be able to move forward without feeling like, how do I pick? There's just so much, because some people are ravenous readers. They will, or Audible listeners, like, they'll gobble everything up that they can in a rapid form. Other people are much slower, just because of work and other hobbies and everything. So, um, I haven't yet figured out where is
I
how
think the
deep does it need to go before it's
yeah,
overwhelming. I don't know if I
I think that varies from person to person, right?
yeah,
Because
that was what I was going to say. But you have to have like a level of expectation, and like with Revelations, I want it to feel like it's a more mature sci-fi universe.
right.
So I'm kind of feeling that out. There's not a lot of other, and I'm not knocking anybody else's stuff. There isn't a lot of other developers trying to do what I'm trying to do. So, it's in terms of like the people who mix in like books and lore, and like, it's a very uh setting heavy game.
No, that I would 100% agree with that because you either have the already established franchises like Warhammer or Star Wars or even BattleTech that have always done that and have tons of fiction, but most of the new games that you see popping up, it's the game. and the setting is like a few pages in the manual, or a blurb in the back of the box or something like that. They don't go around writing new novels and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, it's a big undertaking.
Yeah, and maybe even the creators, some people are more interested in creating like game systems and game mechanics than to actually creating settings or universes, if that makes sense. Like the visual aspect, if it's a western game or a sci-fi game or a fantasy game, they like this look, and they like creating games and creating rules and playing games. They're not particularly concerned like what's the life of an elf in this setting or something.
Yeah. Well, and it might also be my perspective. I can't model, I can't draw, so I can't be visually heavy.
Yeah.
So my pseudo gift is in the lore creation. So I that's that's more of the why, and then Revelation Skirmish is kind of just how you can experience it.
Now, how deep does the lore need to go? I think that depends on each person, because some people have shorter attention spans.
Oh yeah.
Some people want to feel interested in the lore, but they aren't really going out to buy the 15 novels that have been published or something. While others, like you said, start becoming super fans and start consuming everything. And then when they consume everything, they want even more, right?
Oh yeah. Faster than you can make it.
Yeah. This is the eternal issue, and it's been cross media, because that's how you get TV shows that become like the CSIs of the world, where you basically each episode is its own thing. And if you watch the show all the time, sure, you can get some details here and there, but these procedural shows were built that way in order that you can watch one episode from season 1 or one episode from season 5, and it's basically the same shit, right? And they do that in order to not overwhelm new viewers, and in order to make it as friendly as possible for you to get into the show. On the opposite end, you have shows like Stargate or The Expanse or something like that, or Babylon 5 in the 90s, where you go in an episode on season 4 of Stargate, and you're like, what the hell is going on, and what's all this incredible lore that they spent years building. So that might alienate someone, but I'm always with the perspective that just make it the best you can and make it super interesting, because even if it's episode 87 of a TV show, if most TV shows I got into was like I saw like an episode and I found it interesting, and then I went back to watch the others. It's been pretty rare that has started to change with the whole streaming era, but most of my life it was like that, it was pretty rare that I watched a TV show from episode 1, or a comic book from issue 1, right? Just because I started reading Amazing Spider-Man in issue like 157 or something doesn't mean that, oh my god, it's issue 157. I can't get into this title. It needs to be issue 1. Even though the publishers themselves think like that. That's why they keep rebooting the numbering. But like, it doesn't turn me off that Detective Comics is in issue 1091 or something like that, because I like Batman, of course.
Yeah.
And if that is your first ever Batman story, just make it really good, and then that person will be interested in catching other stuff that Batman is in. That doesn't mean he's going to read all 1090 previous issues of Detective Comics. I mean,
Right. Well, and one other point to make, I've purposefully set out that with Revelation Skirmish, you don't need to know anything to play the game. I've
Right,
designed it specifically so that you can just play the game. Maybe you want to just read the primer just so that you kind of get like a pulse check on things, just so you kind of know, okay, like who's the core republic? Why should I care? Who are these guys? Why should I care? Kind of thing. But you don't have to buy all these other lore supplements and novels in order to feel like, okay, I'm a competent player in this game. Like you don't. It's a pickup game where you build your list and you just blow stuff up at the
right,
end of the day.
right,
And
right.
then if you want to go deeper, there is a much deeper end. But at the same time, I designed the novels that you may never ever play the game. And there's no requirement, there's no expectation to ever play the game. They can exist separately, but the best experience is obviously together because then you can kind of understand things differently and there's mini campaigns and stuff where you're kind of playing sections of lore history and I think that's, in my opinion, one of the better approaches because for some players I recognize someone may not have time to read, you know and
Yeah.
how can I put the burden on them that, like, well, if you don't read this trilogy, you're not going to understand and comprehend fully the war that's happening. Like, not everyone cares. And giving those players who just want to just put their toe in and just have fun painting mechs. Um, that's there, and that's totally acceptable for me. As the developer, that some people won't go through everything. Like because I obviously am interested in it, but I can't expect everyone else to be as at the same level as me.
You know what makes, and this isn't just regarding lore, it's also like game systems and the way things are explained. You can explain the same rule in a really shitty way, or in a really clear way, and that will influence how the player sees the game, right? if it
Oh
if
yeah,
if he's
yeah.
attracted to the game, and if he understands the game. So in the last few years, Catalyst have really revamped the way the all those rule books are structured. I still think it's silly that BattleTech has like 7 or 8 rule books each with 200 pages, and it's like a giant mess. But they have really streamlined, and they have reshaped the chapters in some of those books, and even took they in some books they took chapters out, put them in another book because they reached the conclusion that it made more sense for those chapters to be in that other book, and that does help. So so for a long time, for example, you might feel overwhelmed that to play BattleTech, and to make a campaign specifically, you had to like go read 4 or 5 different books, because there were systems in each book that you needed, and it really helps when they reorganize the book line. So now that when you want to make a campaign, you just have to go by, I don't know which book it is right now, like Tactical Operations or something like that. On the other end, I mean, BattleTech has tons and tons of lore, tons and tons of history, or Star Wars as well. I mean, someone that never watched the Star Wars movies can still go watch The Mandalorian, right? So there's ways that you can make things accessible while still
Mm-hmm.
providing
Right.
deep lore. It's
Yeah.
it's about the storytelling and about the themes of stories. So,
Right.
and then obviously the game systems, you don't need to know exactly how like a Gauss rifle works, as long as the rules are clear. If you want to go find out how a Gauss rifle works, the lore is there. I don't think that's overwhelming, right? You have elements that please lore only people, game only people, or people that like both.
Yeah. And that's part of the development, is making things, like you said, accessible. So you just try to make things have a easier entry point. And it's no different than even like, how do I get into the game? Just the game itself. How do I get into it? And you just try to make it as clear as possible. Download these rules and start from there. Everything else will make sense.
and
Um,
and if you watch other media, you can get good senses of how to do accessibility. You don't need to
mhm.
like super dumb it down like some TV shows or movies do,
Oh, I
but
don't believe in that.
Yeah, and I know you don't, and I don't either. But just like in comics and TV shows and movies, you can make specific sections, particularly at the beginning of things, beginning of episodes or beginning of books, where you're reading what that character is about, and that is there for new readers. So who exactly is this Batman guy? So maybe the first 2 or 3 pages you do have some narration or Batman doing something that perfectly communicates everything that he's about, even though it's not meant to be an introduction to Batman. It's just part of that story. So there are ways that you can write these things into your existing lore, so that you, and if you still want to go find out what Batman has been doing in the previous 6 months, you can still do that. I say
Yeah,
I feel they did a competent job with that stuff in the last Batman and Spider-Man movies, because they skipped doing the origin stories, in part because they are so relevant to mass media and people already know them, but they also made the first movies like accessible enough that you knew what they were about, even in passages between talking between characters. When Alfred casually says like, when your parents died, this and that happened. It's there to tell the audience that doesn't know that Bruce Wayne's parents died, that they died, and that led him into this path. And you probably didn't even think about it, but someone that isn't familiar with Batman will then get that information told in a seamless way through whatever else is happening on that scene.
yeah, yeah. It's a good way to introduce it to the players or to the
To the
readers or
audience. Yeah,
viewers. Yeah, to
yeah,
the audience.
yeah. um I think we can move on to the next question from Wing
Yeah,
Astromar.
sure.
He asks us, best worst scenario your favorite character died in a sci-fi genre. How do you kill a beloved hero of a franchise without killing the franchise? Uh, we could talk about Mass Effect 3.
Damn Mass Effect 3.
We could
I'm
also.
going to be salty about that until I am an old man. I will still be like, they robbed me.
Yeah, that was Mass Effect 3. That effectively, or stuff like, how do you do this sort of stuff without killing a franchise? Because I feel there's been franchises that have become really damaged with some of this stuff. Like Star
I
Wars,
think
for example.
I think it depends a lot on how you've set up your game or your universe. So for example, Halo. If you killed Master Chief, you've killed Halo.
Right.
Now I know that they've expanded and
Yeah.
they've tried to add in other things, especially in the novels. But as far as what the majority of, let's say, more casual players will think, you kill Master Chief, you've killed Halo.
Yeah.
Like,
No
what's
one.
the
No
point of
one
Halo?
cares.
Everything rides on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. And
Um, it with like Star Wars, you have like a core group, at least from the very first movies. You have a core group of characters, and obviously death in terms of storytelling is required. Like there has to be a passing of the torch from some characters to the new characters or to other younger characters or inexperienced, and that's just part of storytelling because it's just part of real life.
especially in
And
in a larger expanded format like Star Wars, where you have
oh
like
yeah,
hundreds of novels and comics and media. At some point, the stakes need. In order to have stakes, some people will have to feel consequences.
right. And it just, I'm trying to be careful not to have any one character be carrying everything. Um, but how do you kill a beloved hero without killing the franchise? It's I think you just have to be super careful not to put too much on one, let's say, faction, or on one core group of people, or on one individual that like just carries things. Like the Mandalorian obviously is about the Mandalorian. If you killed him, you've killed the show. Now you could kill the main character at the very end because whatever reason you want them to go out heroically, so that there's that they died with they gave the ultimate sacrifice in order to save the day. But at that point, we recognize it's probably over. Not too many things continue on once. Like if Batman were to die, now Robin's the main character. There would be so many people who would fall off because they're there for Batman,
Yeah, even
right?
even though obviously DC's cash cow is the Batman associated family, so obviously a lot of people would be pissed if Batman, even though Batman actually already died once, but let's not get into that. Um, um, and other people took his mantle temporarily, but that's another subject. Batman has Nightwing, he has Robin, he has Red Hood, there's Harley Quinn, there's Joker. There's a lot of super interesting characters in the Batman universe that obviously you're not replacing Batman, but the franchise actually goes on, right?
Yeah.
An example of the Star Wars is a franchise that is still going on, and how you kill a beloved hero of a franchise without killing the franchise is you make a smooth transition, and you make the successors, the continuation of the franchise. You get people invested in them, and that was the failure of the sequel trilogy. It it didn't only disrespect the old characters, it made us not care about the new characters. It was both failures, right? The way specifically related to the question, the way Luke Skywalker died was completely dumb. And I'm not
Oh yeah.
getting into Leia because Leia basically had to die off screen, sort of, because Carrie Fisher had passed away. The way Luke died was terrible. It was
Right.
absolute crap. But even if that was there exactly as it is right now, if we cared as much about Rey and Finn and Poe as we cared about Han, Luke, and Leia, it could have worked. We would have just said Luke was like this big hero and they didn't give him a proper send off, but I'm still really excited to see what Rey is gonna do. But they completely failed about all that stuff.
Yeah.
Particularly with the second movie. You can criticize Force Awakens for being superficial and for being essentially a remake of A New Hope, but it did manage to do what it set out to do, which was to re-establish the franchise. I liked Rey, and I liked Finn, and I liked Poe at the end of that movie, and I wanted to know more. The problem was the second movie completely derailed everything. You have Mass Effect, of course, which is a rich world, but Shepard is Mass Effect.
Oh yeah.
And I have some of the comics. They have other characters. They go into the Elusive Man. There are stories about Liara. There's a novel about Saren. All that stuff is super interesting. But but Mass Effect is Shepard, and they showed that by with Mass Effect Andromeda. No one liked the characters in that game. The game is wonky and has problems and all that, but they failed the characters, and none of them could hold a candle to who Shepard was. That was the brilliance of Mass Effect 1. It really made us feel and care and want to be Shepard.
Right. And I think you have to, as a developer, you have to be careful, if you care, that you don't put too much on one person. And if you want to build everything around somebody, you can't really go back, in my opinion. Like you've already established, like, this is the person we were to care about. This is the person whose team we're to care about. Yeah, there's all these other things that are going on around them, but at the end of the day, you're here for them,
But at
right?
least do it the right way. DC is known for the legacy character concept, right? And I can give two clear examples. Obviously, DC has Batman, and then he has Robin and Nightwing and Red Hood and all these associated characters, which also became popular. That's because the legacy aspect was done well, was written well with compelling characters, but they started from the Batman character, Bruce Wayne, and they started as sidekicks, but in apprenticeship from Batman, and you saw them grow and evolve from kids and sidekicks to their own heroes and adults. The bad way to do it is to pull out of your ass that now it's 500 years later and you have to follow these obnoxious twins that are trying to explore another galaxy, and the stakes aren't really clear. Their characters are badly written, and their personalities are like cardboard compared to who Shepard was and how he was developed. A better
Right.
way, actually, to revive or continue Mass Effect would have been if Shepard really died in the ending of Mass Effect 3, but I'm not even going
Garbage.
into that. Right. Right. Garbage. If you actually wanted to continue that story, you could have taken Liara and Garrus, for example, and you play in their shoes as they deal with the fallout of what happened to the universe. And why? Because those are already beloved characters that showed up, evolved, grew, and we grew to love under Shepard. So that would make your job a lot easier, even if they wouldn't be able to quote unquote carry the franchise. At least you wouldn't have the terrible twins.
Yeah. Well, and it when a favorite character dies, it also depends on how how frequent is death in that universe. So
Right.
like with Revelations, I set it up where there's going to be a number of characters that are introduced and that their fate is to die at some point, and maybe I already have it planned out, or I just kind of know, or I'm open to kind of altering as I develop other things and being like, yeah, I think it's better if they go out here. um you don't want to feel like, sometimes in like DC, characters may die and then they can come back sometimes. They like they're and Marvel has that same issue
Even more.
where yep, they're dead. Oh wait, no they're not.
Nothing matters.
So right, there's no stakes now because well, we can just bring them back. It's like Dragon Ball Z. Right?
But
Like
but, but you'll notice the difference there in the example that you gave. In Dragon Ball Z, you actually had an in-universe explanation and justification right from the start on why these people could come back, because the Dragon Balls could grant you the wish to bring them back. These comics have been it's one of the major problems that DC and Marvel have had. These comics have been so dumb that they kill and resurrect characters multiple times, as if it's like this normal thing, you know. And oh, now he's back, oh, now he's dead, oh, now he's back, oh, now he's dead, oh, how exactly did he come back? Oh, it's sort of murky, don't ask too many questions. Or it's since we wrote ourselves into a corner, this is now our alternate universe version of the character, and he's going to replace our main character. Don't ask too many questions.
yeah, and he happens to be just about exactly the same.
And
But
it's so dumb, man. It's so dumb, and you can see what's believable and what's not from what you see in the movies and the reception they had, because you didn't see Tony Stark dying and coming back like 3 times, because it's unrealistic to that believable world concept. And if you know Marvel history, you know that Iron Man has died already like 2 times, at least that I can remember. And the current, if you buy the Iron Man comic that's on the stands right now, Tony Stark actually isn't Tony Stark. He's like He's like a he's either a clone or he's like a virtual construct made solid. It's something stupid like that. The actual Tony Stark is still dead.
Huh.
He died and he never came back.
Well, that makes sense.
But people treat him as if he's like still the real Tony Stark. Or if you're watching, I'm not watching. I'm just watching the train wreck reviews on YouTube. But if you're watching Star Trek Picard, Picard is a robot. The actual Picard died.
What?
Yeah, I spoiled you. Picard.
I'm not gonna watch that. That is
Yeah.
a clear dumpster fire.
Yeah, it is. I'm just watching the reviews to laugh at the show. Basically, Picard dies and is brought back as a sort of data-like body, positronic, blah 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 stuff. So he's basically an android now. But they're still running around the second season, treating Picard as if he's a human and not an android.
Right, and and obviously he's old.
It's so dumb, man. It's so dumb. So it's so basically, and I feel Marvel is going to commit the same mistake with Spider-Man as well, because just the too long didn't read version of the whole Miles Morales Spider-Man thing. Everyone sort of knows that like 20 years ago they started the Ultimate Universe precisely, which was an alternate universe precisely to modernize the characters, because they had a lot of history and they wanted to be more accessible to new readers. Of course, the fallacy of that concept is that when you're in issue 100 of Ultimate Spider-Man, now you have 100 issues of continuity. But let's not get into that. They brought him to the main universe, and now he coexists with Peter Parker in the main Marvel universe.
Right.
But they're not doing that just because of the whole diversity stuff. There's an actual lawsuit. There's a dispute with the estate of the Kirby and Lee families and Ditko families over the ownership of part of Spider-Man. So Marvel is preemptively trying to develop Miles Morales as the potential full-time replacement of Peter in the main universe, in case they legally have to. Because even though he's Spider-Man, you'll notice he's Miles Morales Spider-Man. And in most of media, they actually make it a point to say he's Miles Morales Spider-Man, and the title of his book is Miles Morales Spider-Man, in order for Marvel to 100% own him.
Wouldn't it just be better to be like Shadow Spider-Man or something like that instead of first and last name Spider-Man?
Well, that's an maybe.
Wouldn't
but,
that just would sound like a cooler nickname, like
Yeah.
in universe, than like, oh no, it's Miles Morales Spider-Man. He's gonna get me.
right.
It's just not the same threat.
But the point I'm trying to make is that if you go read those comics, Miles isn't Peter's sidekick. Miles isn't Peter's anything. They barely know each other. They met like 2 or 3 times. So if they end up killing Peter and replacing him, I'm gonna be even more salty about it than I am right now, because Miles has no business. Yeah. Miles has no business being Spider-Man. It's like if I now opened another channel called Revelations Skirmish and I started calling myself Rick Graham. I'm not Rick Graham. Like, why do you have this kid that is unrelated to Peter Parker, doesn't work with him, he's not his sidekick, he's not his cousin, he isn't anything to him and doesn't show up in the Amazing Spider-Man comics, and you're calling him Spider-Man now? That's bullshit. I'll never accept Miles Morales Spider-Man as Spider-Man because of that. He's not Spider-Man. Spider-Man already exists. It's a guy called Peter Parker. And right. If they ever replace him because of these legal reasons, I will never accept him. I will stop reading the book at that point. I don't buy Miles Morales comics and never did. Why? Because he's not Spider-Man. Yeah. That was my Miles Morales is not Spider-Man rant. we didn't even go into the Mass Effect 3 ending rant, but that would take like 3 hours.
I try to put that one away.
Yeah,
It's still salty wound though.
yeah, I noticed. Garbage, garbage. So what? How do you kill a beloved hero of a franchise without killing the franchise? You show respect to him. You make him go out in a respectful and heroic way, and whoever replaces him or continues the story needs to have been developed under him, and you need to like him already. It's gonna be a tall order to make him a new character, a completely new character unrelated to him. That's bullshit, and usually it's never accepted. I can't
Yeah.
recall a single instance where that has happened successfully.
I
Even if you go into the history of Flash, and most people obviously the Flash in movies and TV shows has been Barry Allen, but he was actually replaced in 1987 with Wally West. But Wally West was already an established decades old character called Kid Flash, who was the sidekick of Barry, and Barry made it a point that Wally continued his legacy. And then they told awesome stories with Wally, and Wally became my favorite Flash. Up to this day, Wally is still my favorite Flash, even more than Barry. And that's how you do it. And Barry died in a super heroic way, trying to save the universe.
yeah. I'm sitting here thinking I can't think of another time where you had someone who was clearly a very important character being killed off and then someone else taking their place, or let's say maybe not totally taking their place but now needing to be the one to lead or to carry on.
Right.
And I can't really think of any example where the fans, to my knowledge, and there will always be fans who are like, yeah, I like Hot Rod more, or Rodimus Prime rather more than Optimus Prime. Okay, well, you're wrong,
Yeah,
but they do exist, I'm sure.
100% wrong.
Yeah, Hot Rod killed Optimus. You can't convince me otherwise. That kid was goofy. But yeah, it just depends, and I think you are 100% right. You have to develop other characters so that when that character goes, and I think it's you you kind of establish the rules of the universe, like how often characters can die, and when it comes to like the superheroes topic, Marvel and DC and others, it's really difficult
Are terrible.
because
Terrible.
they're also set up to be the hero, and it's not normal for them to be like, okay, here's your Justice League. Oh, Wonder Woman died, and that's it. Like, and then she's dead, and then you bring in somebody else to Hawk Girl or somebody else to now be that sort of type of character going forward. You know, like Marvel and DC, they can't afford to upset fans by removing one of these big pillars. You know,
Well,
if you lose an Iron Man, it's a big deal. Now I know in the movies they're trying in the MCU they're trying to continue on, but there's already you see fans saying that it died at the end of Endgame. It was
yeah,
over.
yeah.
Why? They lost almost the entire main cast.
That's why
So
people are
it's
excited
just hard to
about.
move forward.
That's why people are excited about this new Thor movie, because Thor is still one of the original ones. That they,
Yeah, for now.
yeah, I know the whole Jane Foster stuff, but you in comics they
That
have tried to pull this shit off. I mean, if I told you how Batman died, he died fighting Darkseid, being hit by the deadly Omega beams that Darkseid that are sort of an insta kill thing, but in reality, I don't. For some shenanigans that I can't even explain, he went back in time into prehistoric times and tried to survive there and leave a signal that would be fossilized through the ages, so that the heroes in the future would know that he's still alive, because he spent some time where the DC universe thought he was dead, even though he was still alive in the past. And then someone went back into time to get him. I mean, it's so stupid. You never see that in live action. You would never see it in live action. I'm still trying to understand how Darkseid's insta kill Omega beams that are ultra powerful wouldn't have killed a regular human and would have sent him back in time instead.
What you're not thinking of
I
is
read the
that
story and I don't even understand it.
if you are pure of heart, the Omega beams can't kill you. They just send you away, and or something.
There's been instances where he launched Omega memes to teleport someone to him. That happened with Superman, for example. But that's Superman, and the context in the comics wasn't that. Darkseid was actually trying to kill Batman. Imagine if Christian Bale or this Robert Pattinson version, which was also a cool movie. Imagine if that happened. Viewers are like, oh my god, he got hit by the super villain's ray and he's dead. Oh no, no, he's now a caveman in the past doing paintings on the walls, and someone is going back. Flash is going back in time to get him, and he's like walking around naked with a huge beard. The hell is this shit?
Yeah, it wouldn't.
It's
I
so
don't know.
dumb.
It would feel like the biggest stretch.
You know what they have been talking about? They can still go back and get Captain America because for all intents and purposes, Captain America didn't actually die. You can go tell the stories of Chris Evans returning the Infinity Stones across multiple points in the time stream, and nothing is stopping them from telling adventures where he's going on adventures in the past because he went to live with Sharon Carter, right? That's how Endgame ended. He was dancing in a house
Yeah,
with Sharon Carter, and
right.
his old version said he got married and they lived very happily. He could still have gone on adventures. It's just secret adventures or something like that. He never died. He didn't
I
die.
I just I just wanted to see the interaction between him and Red Skull.
Right, right. But
That
Tony
was the.
Tony Stark, you know how they've been talking about bringing Downey Jr. back eventually, is following the comics where they replaced Iron Man with a black female teenager, and Tony Stark was her AI.
That would
So
be a very expensive AI.
so they would have Robert Downey Jr. basically be a Star Wars style hologram coaching the kid. But here's the catch: just like we have been talking about, no one likes Riri Williams, that character that replaced him, because she's an entitled idiot that thinks because Tony Stark is rich, she should steal his technology, make it better, because obviously Tony Stark is an evil white guy, so he can't do stuff better than the young black chick, and then go around telling everyone she's a hero, even though she never saves anyone, and is only concerned about protecting the technology that she stole from a better character. It's gonna be super fun if they actually do this in the movies. Obviously, they can't tell this story because no one would go watch that movie. They will
Well,
have
they tried doing that with Batwoman. You know, it'll be what is it like? It's the effect. It'll be
yeah,
perfect when it can fit a woman. Like
yeah.
what are you talking about?
It's so
What are you
dumb.
you're just desecrating Bruce Wayne's grave at that point. Like why say that?
And they're now coming out with the Miss Marvel Disney Plus TV show, and because that character is terrible and no one likes her in the comics, they actually, and her powers are stupid. The character you're gonna see on screen is actually not that character. It's the character
What?
in name and look only, but they gave her a totally different power set because no one likes her powers. Her powers are basically like Mr. Fantastic's from the Fantastic Four. She can grow like big hands and be somewhat elastic. That's her powers.
I thought she could like fly and stuff too.
I think in the movies now she will be able to fly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, well, but that's also because they're clearly trying to set up like the X-Men and possibly the Fantastic Four as well.
no,
I'm
but
sure that they're trying to figure out how to bring these characters on board.
Yeah, I'm sure. They're just in fact there are leaked negotiations between Marvel and Hugh Jackman because they realize again this problem. You got rid of all the characters people loved, and we need to have some people to anchor in all the new characters. Otherwise, they will continue to run into the problem they are already running into. Is that no one cares about the Eternals, no one cares about Shang-Chi, all that. Creating new franchises is okay, but you need to do it well, and they haven't done it well. And even though there's some questionable stuff in the Thor movie, at least it's going to be a Thor movie, and the Guardians of the Galaxy are in it, and all that sort of stuff. So they're talking about bringing Robert Downey back as an hologram for whoever they try to replace him as Iron Man, and they've been talking about all that sort of stuff. About maybe having Hugh Jackman back in 2 or 3 movies to reintroduce the X-Men because they need to have someone there that people already love.
And he's basically it. I know, as far as that goes, but
Yeah, it would
yeah.
be either him or Patrick Stewart, who apparently is actually showing up in a scene in the new Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah, but he's really getting old.
Yeah, and he's not an action hero. That's the point.
Well, that's true too.
They need to basically have someone, even if they still make him the old man Logan character, which considering Hugh Jackman's age is probably what they're gonna do. They're probably gonna try to bring like an alternate Wolverine from the multiverse that is old man Logan, and then Jackman can do like 2 or 3 other movies, and it would be basically him making the new X-Men or something like that. I don't know. Um, but we have now turned into the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast.
It's an accident, but
Yeah,
it's related to the conversation of killing characters.
yeah. So basically, treat your characters with respect and build characters under them, in so that them replacing the other character feels like an organic thing that could happen. As part of best and worst scenarios, your favorite character died in the sci-fi genre. I would say Luke Skywalker was even worse than Shepard, so I'm gonna say worst scenario. What they did to Luke Skywalker, they made one of the most noble, most heroic, most idealist characters in movie history into someone that tried to kill his nephew over a bad dream, and then left all his friends to die by secluding himself in an island, and then came back but really didn't, and then died without having actually done much, and died in a non-heroic way because he just stopped existing. And best scenario or favorite character died, I would say. I mean, Iron Man is not my favorite character, but the one that comes to mind right now is really how he died in Endgame. He died a hero, saving the universe from the biggest threat the universe had ever known. You can't, and in a way that did the character proud. And you really can't top that.
Yeah, I agree.
So moving on to getting back to our scheduled programming, we have a question from Killer Kane. What's your favorite assault mechs? Which I'm guessing is a BattleTech question.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, my favorite assault mech is obviously the Warhawk or the Mazakari. Always has been. So yeah, that's a really clear one. It's my personal mech, and I always try to have a Warhawk both from my clan character and from my mercenary character. What's your favorite assault mech, Rick?
Hmm. I visually the Atlas has to be on like the top two
Yeah,
because it's just a badass, you know. mech. Um, I'm also pretty partial to like the Viking 2C, just because it's
Is that the missile boat?
yeah, lots and lots of missiles.
So you want to do like MechWarrior 4, where you're standing behind a hill, you jump, you rain 120 missiles, and then you go back to safety.
Sort of.
Yeah,
I yeah. So there's just different ones for different jobs. The Atlas is just was always obviously designed to be like this big intimidating thing. So it's
yeah,
just always the pinnacle of badass looking mechs. You know.
yeah. I agree. I
And
agree. And final question: Woe77 asks us terrain and battlefield conditions. I think it's probably what we think about having terrain and battlefield conditions in our games. Um, well, Black Star is a tournament game, so sure, there's some terrain stuff there and some battlefield conditions there, but it's mostly about beating the opponent that is in front of you, just like in medieval tournaments. And I haven't really thought about multiple arenas for starters, even though they exist in the lore. I will be just developing the single main arena, so that does have like a terrain type and some conditions there. But in terms of your game, Rick, since you're an army game and played on battlefields, actual battlefields, what do you think about this stuff?
well, for me, when I designed Revelation Skirmish, I specifically wanted to design it where terrain is critical, because you have to be able to justify the mechs being in the game for me.
Yeah,
Tanks and aircraft can do such a good job. Why would I want a mech? Well, the mechs excel in dense terrain situations. If we just did a big open field, one, it would be a very boring game, but two, the mechs wouldn't really have an opportunity to shine because, yeah, they're huge, right? Even though they're usually around 2 to 3 stories. It's still a building walking around as opposed to a tank, which can be, dramatically shorter
yeah,
and still carry comparable firepower. So the terrain matters immensely. If you try to play Revelation Skirmish with like Warhammer 40,000 level terrain, you're going to be upset because it's just not designed for that. It's meant to, plus most of the weapons have infinite range. Well, you're only playing on a 3 by 3 space, so infinite range in that space isn't really that far.
yeah.
Um,
It's all an abstraction anyway.
yeah, and then with battlefield conditions, that is another thing that I was recently talking to a player, a new player, and I was expressing to them like how important um, experiencing the game, because the conversation was about balancing certain units and other things, and I was super appreciative for the feedback. But at the same time, it's like, well, but were you playing with battlefield conditions? Were you playing with the order cards? Were you playing with um, deployment, with the way that the game modes are set up? There's everything is super easy to follow. I've tried to design it so it's very streamlined, straightforward. But if you're not experiencing the game to its full capacity, you're not experiencing the game to its full capacity. You're um, eliminating certain elements of it. So, um,
And
just
the
briefly,
and those
go ahead.
elements relate to other elements, and that's the problem. That's the issue.
So, with for example, certain units might be really strong, and we try to balance that out with points and then with counter units, basically, that are available to the other faction. Um, but then when you play certain environmental conditions, it now affects certain types of weapons, energy or ballistic or missile, certain movement, modifiers. So those environment conditions affect what you might find is like, oh man, this list is so good. And then you play a different environment condition, you're like, oh my gosh, my list sucks. Well, because the environment changes, and I wanted that on purpose, so that because there's games I play, Star Wars Legion. where there's almost no environment situation. So you can find a really strong list. And yeah, there's other counters and stuff, but you're not really going to have to upset the apple cart too much. And I wanted one, it was a reason for players to experience other types of units. So it kind of forces you to kind of learn new tactics,
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
how what this unit excels at in this sort of these, 3 or 4 scenarios, but then like over here, I got to kind of find someone to replace him. Um, so it works on different fronts, and I think what I was another benefit is that hopefully the game doesn't ever really feel stale, because if you play it the way that it was designed, it forces in a comfortable way. It's not just like throw everything out, but it does force you to try different tactics and try different units.
It's
Um,
variety.
yeah, and if you're the attacker or the defender, you have different objectives. So then, you're already changing your list just in that respect. So it's minor, but it adds up to in my I'm hoping that players see it as a richer experience for them to have.
Yeah, I mean, the clearest example I can remember is, uh, obviously, if you don't use terrain and a lot of visual impediments, you have no use for indirect fire weapons.
Well, that's true.
But if you actually do put like a lot of buildings and structures and forests and stuff like that in your table when you go to play, then maybe indirect fire weapons will be a really useful addition to your loadout. So that would be a clear example. Games of Warhammer 40k, for example, tend to have like people start shooting right in the first turn and all that, and the miniatures are big, and the tables aren't like gigantic, but the weapons ranges you can pretty much do anything. Um, but that's why you see these Warhammer games with a lot of scenery on the table. It's to provide cover. It's to provide blocking views, and interesting tactical gameplay that otherwise wouldn't exist, and you might as well not move and just shoot.
Yeah, and that's not an exciting game at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's no use for that a Viking uh, indirect fire loadout with thumpers or arrow fours or whatever you want to put in there if you don't have buildings blocking the way. So
Yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's cool. Like you said, it gives. It's just a little thing that can give more depth and more variety to the gameplay, and also usefulness to other systems.
yeah. And as a developer, you don't want at least in my opinion, you don't want players to end up getting to where like it's a checker game where like
Yeah,
this is just what I do every single
exactly.
time I play. You want it to be different, and then you introduce a new unit or a new faction or some new keyword or something, like you can change a lot of things in a good way. Like you can add a lot of value for relatively an easy development or an easy release. um Hopefully you don't want to go so far where it's absolutely crazy, so I try to be careful of new rules, like getting to where you feel like it's BattleTech, where you have to have all this information and all these books with you. So
Yeah,
it's a balancing act.
that actually reminds me, if we tweak H2CO3's question a little bit, it would could be in a theme for an entire podcast, which would be how deep do the rules need to go before it's all overwhelming for new players.
Yeah, no, that's a very big thing, and I'm sure you play a lot of games through your time as a gamer. I've played a lot, and I've seen some very bad examples.
Yeah, yeah. Some games are really hard to get into. Some games are really easy to get into, and then inside those qualifiers, you would have, is the game actually complex or is the game just really simple and that's why it's easy to get into? So
Yeah, and yeah,
the magic is having a game that is really deep but is easy to get into.
agreed.
And I think that's all the questions for today. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about, Rick?
I don't think so. I mean, um, covering 6 different questions gave us a lot
Yeah,
outside of the Marvel.
yeah. We did a detour there talking about Marvel and DC to some extent. This is not the Batman and Marvel podcast. But
Yeah.
since I don't think any of us want to add anything else, I'm kicking everyone out until the next episode, sometime next week or something like that. People were posting memes asking where the new episode was. We didn't. We recorded 2 days late, guys. Calm down.
It's not
But
my fault.
yeah, it's my fault. I fully admit it's my fault. And Rick was sending me texts every hour asking where I was for 2 days straight. Um, but actually, we both really appreciate all the feedback, comments, and the love that we have been feeling. Everyone interested in the podcast, you have my thank you.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. No, I've been very pleasantly surprised. Because every time you do something new, like I don't know, I don't have 10 million people following where you're like, yeah, I think pretty much anything I do will get some level of success. So I'm still at that level of just very appreciative every time.
Yeah, you would need like not even Games Workshop has that. So yeah, I was gonna
Well,
say
they
something,
have a
but
bad reputation too at
oh yeah,
times.
oh yeah, oh yeah. No, I was gonna say something else, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut, and I'm going to say keep the memes coming, everyone, and see you on the next episode, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.